Thank you. Okay, thank you all for being here today. It's a session that we've kind of put together based on the people that we knew were coming. So we obviously see a list of trusts who are attending, and we can see that there's trusts at various stages of pilot. So it's great to see a couple in the room that are already in pilot phase, and also quite a large number of people thinking about it at the moment. So hopefully this session will maybe spark some ideas, spark some questions, and give you something to go back and discuss with your project teams if you're at that stage putting it together. I was actually going to ask for that show of hands, Ben, so you've kind of taken that from me. But what it did sort of show is there's a number of people in the room who, if you were to obviously take Ben's suggestion and network, there's people you can talk to who are already at the stage that you want to get to, advice that you can ask, and it's probably better for you that you get that from people with their hands-on experience, or, on the wards, part of a project team. I can come and share the experience that we've had from other trusts. Certainly we'll make reference to West London and Northampton from their pilots. But let's just treat this as feel free to ask me questions as we go along, and I'll probably put some questions out there and get a few show of hands along the way. So I think the question, why run a pilot? Probably most of you in the room have got your reasons for wanting to run a pilot. Some of these reasons may resonate with you. If there's other things that you're thinking about where the body camera may help, please let us know, because obviously it may trigger some conversations with other trusts that we hadn't thought about using a body camera in this scenario. So why run a body camera pilot? These are kind of the most popular reasons that we have for trusts wanting to run a pilot of our body cameras. All of them have, reducing violence and aggression groups and forums. And one of the primary reasons for wanting to do this is to see if they can get a reduction of incidents of violence and aggression. It's not designed to be a product for staff only, and I've heard a lot of comments today about, this is the perception is it's only for staff, but we want to make it a product that's about the patient as well. So there'll be, talk about where a patient may wish for the body camera to be switched on, and they may well ask the, the person wearing the body camera if that's possible. I can only think of one or two reasons why it wouldn't be a good idea to switch it on. I think most requests would be able to be fulfilled, and it just makes the patient feel that they're part of this as well. Of course, a reduction of time and cost in investigating complaints. I think there were some questions this morning about whether or not it has reduced complaints with about staff. I can certainly confirm that in some of the trusts that we've worked with, they've seen a reduction in the number of complaints against their staff. In fact, Jim talked about, very briefly this morning, he talked about the patient that asked for the body camera to be put on for searches. This patient, just to expand on that a little bit, was accusing staff of taking equipment, whether it might be his tobacco or his rolling papers that he wasn't supposed to be getting on the ward. He's quite creative in the way he got them on the ward, so was searched quite often. And it was this guy that was complaining against the staff, saying that they were taking his items. He asked for the camera to be switched on during the searches and when he was giving his possessions back, and there were no more complaints after this. Jim said that there weren't really any incidents where they were taking his possessions. It was all kind of in his head, but this made him feel a lot more comfortable. And it's a story that I like to share because it's one that does involve the patient asking for the camera to be switched on. And I think over time, there'll be more instances where I'll be able to expand my horizon of stories in this incident, where patients are asking for it to be switched on as well. So again, any sort of stories where you have patients requesting, that would be great to know those. This next one, footage for training and learning processes. Not all trusts that have gone into a pilot have included the use of footage for training and learning purposes, and those ones that haven't are not doing that at this stage. It's something that they may plan to do in the future, but some trusts have built in their governance and policies about using the footage for training and learning purposes. So again, this is trust-based and whether or not you want to use it for that reason. Increased professionalism from staff. I certainly wouldn't stand here and say that your staff are unprofessional in any way. I'm sure that the majority of the time they're incredibly professional. But Jim again comments about how when he wears the body camera, it kind of makes him feel a bit more process oriented, and the language that he's using and the terminology that he's using. So he's quite happy to say it makes the member of staff more professional in the way they deliver care as well. So, okay, so the next phase. So I've potentially come, or Marcus has come to meet with you guys. We've discussed the idea of a pilot and we want to go ahead. How do we make it as successful as possible? And some of these things we've learned from over the last year. Building the team is really important, getting the right people. You know, if we can get someone to do 99% of the work, Adelaide, then that's fantastic. But if you can share the load amongst your colleagues, then I'm sure that would work a lot better. But these are the kind of roles that you need to think about to kind of make it more of a seamless kind of pilot. A project lead, so somebody who's going to be that main contact point for everybody at the trust and for Calla, potentially for, you know, any support that might be needed. A governance lead, anyone in the room here who is going to be the governance person writing SOPs and procedures and things. Can we have a show of hands? Is there? No, not too many. An IT lead, capital letters, really important. In fact, Jim Ty from West London at a previous conference said that his biggest mistake with running the pilot was he didn't get IT involved right from the beginning. So by the time he did, they didn't feel it was their project and they weren't as helpful as they could have been. So IT lead is really important to have in place from that early, kind of early stage. It does need to be integrated potentially with the systems that are in use, and it will need to have firewall ports opened and things like that. So IT need to know what is required and they can feedback at that point whether it will be a problem. And a training champion. So obviously Calla will come in and do some basic training on the cameras. To be honest, it's a really, really simple camera. It would take 5 minutes to show somebody how to operate the slide and turn it on and how it's in standby mode and docking it. So these sessions are more about sharing experience with staff. They feel a little bit skeptical about what they're about to embark on. They don't really know too much about the history of the body cameras. They just need that little bit of reassurance. So it's a case of sort of sharing a few stories with them about how it's been working at other trusts and things to look out for. And I find that they're really, really useful, and it does start to get them talking amongst themselves about it. Timeframes is really important. We put a sample up there of the body camera sort of communication that would go out on a ward. But in terms of timeframes, once you have the idea of the project and you've got your agreement to go ahead with it from the directorates, the first thing is that we would send out a camera to your IT department so they can basically set it up, connect it up and make sure it's working properly. They can at that point feed back to us any issues that they might be having. So by the time we get to the training of staff, we know that the system is working properly. In between that, there'll be the ward communications go out, usually within, I don't know, minimum of 2 weeks, up to a month before the pilot starts. These posters go up on the wards that are going to be trialling it, and it encourages the patients to ask the members of staff a little bit more about why, how, when, that kind of thing. Agree on a go live date, and if we can get that agreed, before the testing of equipment, it gives you that sort of target to have everything in place by. It's very easy for these things to slip. And more important than ever is these mid-pilot reviews, because it won't always work perfectly from the start. Some little changes might need to be made. If we make sure we have a mid-pilot review around 6 to 8 weeks in, it gives us a chance to make some changes to the pilot to make it work better for you. Ideally, ahead of that sort of 2-month period, but also get an end of pilot review date in. So this will be when you would sort of get together, discuss the measures that you had in place and whether it was a success or not. So measures, and again, this is kind of open to interpretation. Your own measures will be put in place, but this would be discussed at the pilot meeting. There's no point, obviously, running a pilot and then at the end of it going, "No, so how did it work for you then?" Oh, don't really know, to be honest with you. I don't know what we were comparing it against. So this is where we're going to sort of get some measures down, the frequency of incidents and the type of incidents. Based on the reasons that you're looking to put it together as well. So if there's a cost-saving exercise involved, then we'd look at the 3 or 6 months leading up to having the cameras in place, the cost of bank and agency staff as a result of stress-related illnesses or time off work due to some kind of verbal or physical incident. And we'll measure that against the 3 months, or if it extends for longer, the 6 months of the pilot as well. a lot of the business case at the end of a pilot would be put together on anecdotal feedback from staff, their well-being, how they feel. There'll certainly be some statistics as well, but I think that anecdotal stuff from staff is going to be really, really important and sort of a good mechanism for having a business case agreed. I've mentioned Datix here. Every trust I tend to go to is using the Datix system, and they're starting to talk about linking, whether that be a manual process or some kind of electronic process of linking an incident to the Datix and whether or not there's some body camera footage. So that's certainly something that could be discussed. The measures that you're going to put in place will vary, and this depends on what you're looking to achieve from the pilot and the setting that you're using the camera. So certainly, it may be different measures from your mental health wards, emergency or A&E, trauma. Basically, the different wards will have different measures and requirements of the body camera. So it's difficult to list a load of measures here, but this is again something that we put in place at the start of a pilot. Have a look at the mid-pilot review stage, see if it's working and whether we need to change the measures. Ready for the last part of the pilot. So measures to use, the frequency of verbal and physical abuse against staff and obviously generally patients on patients. I certainly wouldn't hope there's a lot of verbal and physical abuse of staff on patients, but if there is, body cameras will certainly help there as well. Feedback from the users of the camera. So this is really the surveys that we use from either patient and staff. So both surveys are available. Ben's got some templates, but I recall Adelaide saying that there was a lot of other questions that potentially weren't part of our survey, so they put their own one together. Is that something you might be able to share with us as well, Adelaide, some of the questions you put in the survey, so we can perhaps share that out as well? That would be good. And the number of complaints and time spent investigating. So, picture paints 1,000 words. If you do have video footage of an incident where a staff or a patient has been accused of something, the time and cost of investigating that is brought right down if you have, the video. And again, I've heard quite a few people say that, the patient dropped the complaint as soon as they realised there was body camera footage, so it didn't go anywhere. And the cost of replacing staff absent due to stress or injury, obviously mentioned that at the beginning. I know that agency and bank staff is generally a lot more expensive than the member of staff who's employed full-time by the trust. But not only are you paying the agency and bank staff, you're also paying the member of staff who's off sick as well. So it's almost like a double cost if somebody does have time off due to stress or injury. So engagement during the pilot, we've got I probably won't be able to see it too clearly, but example of some of the sort of survey questions that might be asked over there on the right-hand side. But it's important to ensure that staff remain, fully engaged and motivated during the pilot. It's often a new thing at the beginning, there's a lot of buy-in, it works well, and then over time it starts to just diminish as people kind of get complacent with it. So what we want to make sure is happening, that there's regular internal staff debriefings. So I think Adelaide, you talked about getting together on a monthly basis and discuss how it's going. I think that's really good. So, but also Calla to engage with staff. So what I'm finding more and more is that the staff appreciate a visit and encouragement, sharing of stories, and giving them a chance to kind of feedback to somebody outside of their organisation how it's working for them. They might not always be completely, upfront and honest about how they feel about it with their line manager. Quite often they'll be happy to sort of mention to an outside person exactly how they're feeling and how it's working for them. So just gives us a chance to get a different feedback from staff that are using it. Mid-pilot survey I've mentioned again here. Obviously I can't stress the importance of these type of things. Mid-pilot meetings and surveys give us chance to kind of make changes to the back end of the pilot and make sure that we get more of a desired result than perhaps just leaving it as it was. So that gives us the opportunity to make improvements or adjustments and share the success stories, but won't always be success stories. There might be times where someone says it didn't work for me in this instance, because we need to share those as well, because if other trusts well actually they were going to use it in this incident but it didn't quite work, it might be sort of a chance for them to say, well, I'm not going to use it in that incident either, or in that type of scenario. So just, I think this is the last slide, reviewing and evaluating. So this would be at the end of the pilot. meet up with ourselves to check performance against measures, see whether or not we managed to achieve what we wanted to achieve. And we'd take a look at the a post-pilot survey. We'd get the patient and staff comments following the pilot. It's interesting to see the videos that Ben played in the beginning. You see the comments of the staff and then the comments a year on. And generally that's what we're seeing is, I don't remember what it was like before I had body cameras. I do, you know, rely on them as part of my PPE or my equipment now. Wouldn't want to give it up. Build the business case. There's lots of things that might go into the business case in terms of statistics, but also that staff feedback is very, very important as well. Discuss procurement route. There's obviously, I think you mentioned a tender this morning, Adelaide, in your slides. There is a route to procurement through G-Cloud. The service is on the approved government G-Cloud framework, which gives you a nice, easy route to procure if you need to. We've already had one trust use the G-Cloud procurement route, and I think that once they have gone through that process, other trusts are now showing an interest in the G-Cloud procurement route as well. So certainly happy to discuss how that works. And then next steps. So next steps for today, I'm kind of thinking that there's a lot of people here. You've made the effort to come here today because you're at a certain stage of a pilot. I would imagine a lot of people were probably at the early stages. There's not so many trusts here that are at the latter stages of a pilot. So I would certainly offer myself to come and see you and your project teams. My colleague Marcus certainly would be very keen to come out and see the acute trusts and discuss with you know, the LSMSs or security leads or nursing leads who are involved in the pilot as well.